Okay. Last night, we had Rabbi Marcus, who spoke, really phenomenal. Diane, I'd encourage you to find out if you could go to a class of his in Neve, because he was mind-blowing yesterday. He speaks in Neve. I know he may speak other places too, that I don't know, but you can find out. It'll be worthwhile to check it out. Thank you. Thank you very much. So there is a recording of it, I think. Hopefully it came out well. It's not going to be the same because there was some visuals, but I think there's enough information there that's mind-blowing that it's worth the time. If you're interested, call the office. We're happy to send it to you. Okay, this week's Parsha Yisro, a relatively small Parsha. One of the most unknown things about the Parsha is that it's my bar mitzvah portion. Okay. All right.
What year was that?
It was around 5 years ago. Give or take.
You said every year.
In any event, I say this all the time. It's amazing how my kids are aging and I'm not. Just really, it's amazing. But in any event, thank God. Parsha Yisro is only 72 verses, but it has packs a big wallop, as we're going to get into. The Parsha is Yisro, which is the name of a person. Anyone know any other portions, names of people? I'm sorry? Balak is one. What else? Just a little pop quiz on the side. Any other portions, names of people? Oh, come on.
Pinchas.
What? Pinchas, good. What else? Chaisara. Those of you in the Hebrew reading class, Noach, second portion of the Torah, that's a name, okay? Moses is not a name of a portion. No, that's it. Okay, so Yisro, who was he? He was a former advisor to Pharaoh, who, when Pharaoh asked, what should we do with the Jews? He defended the Jews. And Pharaoh didn't like that advice. So Yisro skipped out of town and ran to Midian. And there he actually had 7 names. The Torah has 7 names for him, and he had 7 daughters. And he ran to Midian. He became a priest for the religion there, and he rejected it, realizing that it wasn't true. And he was a searcher. He was looking for finding the truth. He became Moshe's father-in-law. One of his daughters, Zipporah, married Moshe, and the Parsha begins, Vayishma Yisro, and Yisro heard. He heard what happened to the Jewish people, the splitting of the sea, and the war with Amalek. There's a powerful Hasidic thought on this. Only Yisro heard? Everybody heard. It was on CNN. It was on the internet. It was all over the place. The miracles that had transpired for the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, by the way, the oral tradition tells us that when the sea split, all the waters in the world split as well, to let everybody know what was going on. So what does it mean? Yisro heard. Everybody heard. So when someone explains something to me, and I say, I hear you, what does that mean? I hear you loud and clear. What does that mean?
Understand?
I understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hear you means I hear you? No. So Yisro heard what had happened, and it became an impetus for change, for growth. A lot of people see or hear something inspiring and they move on. Story about an Israeli fellow who was going through Africa with a buddy of his, and he's in a taxi telling this to a rabbi in his car, and he says, hey, I'll tell you an unbelievable story. We were in the jungle and a snake wrapped himself around my friend, and we try to pull it off. It's not going. And he's squeezing tighter and tighter. And my friend, who was secular, said, we're all secular guys, and my friend said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, here is all, God is one. And the snake slid it off. And that motivated my friend to become religious because he saw that the Shema saved his life. So the rabbi said, what about you? Oh, it didn't happen to me, it happened to him. So he saw the story, but he didn't get the message, right? He didn't get the message. So Yisro understood that it's not simple. Another story in California, there was a bunch of years ago, there was a guy who was attempting suicide on one of the freeways. I don't remember what it was. And they had to divert traffic from it. And one of the guys who was diverted off the freeway noticed that the work site that he works at, the forklift was lying on its side, and it wasn't supposed to be that way. So he drove in. It was like a long weekend, and he was finished work already, but he saw that, so he drove in, and he found there was a worker underneath the forklift, and he was able to save him, get him out. And the man who was saved, his wife, said, "What a miracle!" And the guy who was saved said, "Oh, well, why was it a miracle? He happened to be driving by, and he happened to see it." And he didn't realize, what do you mean? The guy was on the freeway doing crazy things, and that had to divert traffic, and it happened to be that this guy happened to be there, and he happened to drive by, and he happened to decide to go in to fix what was going on with the forklift, and his life was saved. So you can see and hear things, but if you don't process it and act upon them, that's exactly the right word. And that, by the way, inspiration is a very fleeting thing. You feel inspired, and then you just get a little lazy and you don't do it anymore. And that's a powerful idea, and that's an important. Yisro was not that person. He heard what happened, and he decided to do something about it. And he was coming to Moshe with the Jewish people that were in the desert, and he brought Zipporah, Moshe's wife, and his 2 sons with him. And he let Moshe know that he's coming. And Moshe gives him great honor. And he goes out to greet him. And once he went out, Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, went out. And when everyone saw Moshe, Aaron, Nadav going, so everybody went along. So he got big honor. And Moshe was doing outreach to try to bring him closer to Torah. And he told him great details about going out of Egypt and the war with Amalek, and about the manna from heaven and the well, and being taken out of Israel. And Yisro decides to convert. He decides he wants to become a Jew. And that's a real process. And that's takes a lot of work and a lot of time for a person to become Jewish. It's not you don't take a Jewish pill and become Jewish. You really have to put in the work and learning to be able to take on that responsibility to be a Jewish person. But thank God, I know a lot of people who we're honored to have, some of them involved with JLE, that have done the work to make it happen. So Yisro is there, and Moshe makes a meal. And what the Torah says is, and Yisro says, Baruch Hashem, blessed is God that saved you from the hands of the Egyptians and from Pharaoh. And I see now that God is the God of from all powers. And it says, Aaron and all of the elders came to eat bread with the father-in-law of Moshe before God. Question is, all these people came. Where was Moshe? He was serving. He was serving. He didn't stand on ceremony. He was taking care of the guest, which is very nice. Now, the next part is really jumping ahead. The Torah, by the way, is not necessarily in chronological order. And the next part has to do with asking questions from a rabbi. So we're going to talk about, first of all, there's books called, so some of you may have heard of the 5 books of the Torah. You may have heard of Tanakh, the books of prophets and the writings. You may have heard of the oral Torah, the Mishnah and the Talmud, and you may have heard of the Medrash, and you may have heard of the commentaries. But there's a whole section of books called Sha'alos v'Tshuvos, questions and answers. These are halachic questions that people ask, and they want to know the application of Jewish law. There are many fascinating, most of them are not translated, but there are many fascinating questions and answers about life. And we get historical insights into it, and we also get Jewish law insights into it. I'm going to share one that I shared with some kids that I read recently that is interesting. A guy steals someone else's car. Unbeknownst to the thief, an Arab put a bomb underneath the car. And he parks the car at a restaurant, and he goes into the restaurant to eat. And while he's in the restaurant, the car blows up. So the Israeli police come, everyone comes, and they see what happened, and they tell them the whole story. And now the owner of the car says, "You stole my car, you owe me a car." The guy who stole the car said, "What do you mean? I saved your life. You could have been in the car when it blew up." Who's right? Members of the committee, what do you think? Does the thief owe him for the car? They're both right. Very Jewish answer. That's really such a Jewish.
No, the thief owes him. He stole a car. Doesn't matter what the after effects are. He stole the car.
Okay, so Khani is saying that the thief owes him the car because he stole the car. That's what the owner was saying. Anybody disagree? The owner owns the car? Yeah, it's blown up. It's not salvageable.
I mean, the thief's intention was
Does
to
the
steal the
thief
car,
have to
not to
pay
save
for
the
car that
man.
he stole? That's the question. You think two votes for the thief. Anybody else?
I'm neutral.
You're neutral.
I want to bet.
You're very Jewish. Okay, I don't want to.
think it's
You
the owner.
remind me of the joke.
I think it's the owner.
I mean, it's a longer joke and it deserves the longer version, but I'm just gonna cut to the chase in this one. They had a Jewish jury, and the finally after the trial, the judge says, "Mr. Goldstein, what do you think about the case? What's the verdict? Is the man guilty or not guilty?" So it's elaborate, but I'll just go to the punchline. Your Honor, we thought about it back and forth, and we thought the arguments, and we decided not to get involved. But the jury can't say that. So you got to come up with an answer. What do you think? Does the thief owe him or not owe him? So the answer is that he does not owe him any money. Why? Because since the bomb was underneath the car before he stole it, the car was valueless, had no value. So he stole something that had no value because the car was destined to blow. And therefore he stole something that was valueless, and therefore he doesn't have to pay him for the car that he stole.
Rabbi Czapnik, but the thief didn't know that it was valueless.
So the thief should get a patch on his hand. You shouldn't have stolen the car, but he still doesn't owe the money for it because it had no value.
That's the tshuva from who?
Rabbi Zilberstein says that.
Oh, okay. I'm not arguing with Rabbi Silverstein.
I'm glad because she's afraid I said it, then she would argue. But Rabbi Zilberstein.
No, chas v'shalom.
No, I'm kidding.
Doesn't establish the value. The value is set.
No, so what he brings is an interesting Gemara. The Gemara says that there was a guy who had a liquor store, and there was a guy who was angry at him and came and started smashing the bottles. And then the government came in because they thought this guy had some liquor that the taxes weren't paid on. But because this guy came and smashed, they didn't find anything because he smashed the liquor. So the question is, does this guy owe money to the owner of the liquor store? Because only I could get into side things here, which has nothing to do with Parsha Yisro, but it does. But in any event, does he owe him because he smashed the liquor? So the Gemara says that he does owe him money. Why? Because the guy is arguing, I saved you, because had I not smashed the bottles, the government would have come in and busted you for having some of the liquor that wasn't what you didn't pay the taxes on. So there the halacha is that the guy does have to pay, because when he smashed it, it had value. Someone could have walked in 5 minutes before the government inspected and bought the stuff and paid for it. So there the thief does own the money, even though it ended up being a favor for the owner because he didn't get busted by the cops.
Rabbi, I have a question.
You have a question? Yes.
What if the bomb didn't work?
So good. If the bomb was a dud, so then he would have to pay because the car had value.
But we didn't know the bomb worked till the bomb worked. So if he
That's
got in the
correct.
car,
We don't want to wait to find out if the bomb is working.
so the car did have value, because what if the bomb didn't go off?
But it did go off. So you're asking a hypothetical about what didn't happen. What happened was the thief happened to luckily be in the restaurant and the car blew up. So it showed that the bomb did work and the bomb was set beforehand. So
But the bomb didn't, but the bomb didn't go off when he got in the car, so the car still had value.
oh, you want to buy a car with a bomb in it and hope that you'll be in the car and it won't blow up.
Well,
I
if the
don't
bo-
think so.
But when he got in the car did have value because the bomb had not detonated yet.
No,
So
it
that-
actually did not have value, because the fact that it didn't detonate yet, it still doesn't have value because it's primed to blow and it will blow. And the only question is when.
Okay,
Whatever. Good. It's a food for thought question. It gets you going and everyone gets excited about it. Great. That's exactly my point in giving you a sampling of responsa. That's the English word for questions and answers, responsa. And there's many complex books on responsa. Can you use a Shabbos elevator? Moshe Feinstein has many beautiful questions, which is an elevator that stops on each floor automatically. You don't have to push the buttons. It automatically goes to each floor, and can use that on Shabbos. Artificial insemination, are you allowed to do that? A lot of very heavy, difficult Jewish law questions are dealt with in questions and answers. So here, going back to our parsha, again, the parsha jumps ahead after the Torah is given. Moshe is sitting and everyone's lining up to ask him questions. What happened if, I think my friend stole money from me? Does he owe me? Does he not owe me? What happens if I used a dairy spoon in a meat pot? What do I do then? All these different kind of questions of Jewish law from A to Z. And Yisro saw that Moshe was sitting from morning to night answering questions, and he came up and said, this is not a good idea. Not a good idea. Why not?
Takes too long.
Takes too long. It's exhausting. And he suggested that what you do is you make a lower court and higher court. Every 10 people should have somebody that they can go to ask. If they know the answer, great. And if not, they go to the head of the 50, who knows more. If they know the head of 50, he knows the answer, great. If not, they go to the head of the 100. The head of the 100 knows the answer, great. If not, they go to the head of 1,000. So every group, 10, 50, 100, 1,000, will have somebody who they can go to ask a question. If the head of the 1,000 doesn't know, then they'll go to Moshe and ask him the question. If Moshe doesn't know, he'll ask God. Okay? And the pre-1 says, what happened if God doesn't know? I said, Hashem knows everything. So that's not the issue, okay? All right? So this was Yisro's idea, and Moshe approached Hashem with this idea, and Hashem said, okay. What was disappointing was that people are not hearing directly from Moshe. So there was a little bit of a negative of that. I'll share a story. My rule of thumb is if a story pops into my head while I'm giving a class, I think Hashem wants me to share it. I don't know if I'm right, but that's what I think. There was a doctor who was a tremendous man who did much acts of loving kindness. He was an excellent physician, and he did acts of loving kindness. So a great rabbi sent one of his followers to go to that doctor to ask him about a medical issue that he had. When the man came back to the rabbi asked, did you go to the doctor I told you? He said, I went, but there's waiting, and if there's a rabbi comes in, he lets him cut the line, and 3 hours, I just didn't want to wait, and I left. And the rabbi said, you made a mistake. Because it was worth waiting to see this doctor for 3 hours to see this special soul. Because in the world to come, you're not going to be able to see him because he's going to be way, 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 way up. So what was disappointing about what this idea was that the Jewish people were not going to be learning directly from Moshe because it was going to be the 10, 50, 100, 1,000. So that was a little bit of a negative, and the Jewish people should have complained about it. They didn't. But so God agrees with this idea. Now, what's interesting is that Yisro complains, but that's not where it ends. He came up with an idea. A lot of people like to complain, but do you have a solution? Do you have a solution that could be helpful? And that's what Yisro did, and that's why Yisro is looked upon as, he came up with an idea. Now, I do want, if you have a chumash, I will point out, I want you to see if you can see the difference between two things, what Yisro said and what Hashem said in the end. And Yisro is saying, take people that are men of accomplishment, God-fearing people, men of truth, people who despise money, and you shall appoint them to leaders of the thousands. Okay, I'm on page 399 in your article if you have one. They shall judge the people at all times, and they shall bring every major matter to you, and every minor matter they shall judge, and it will be eased for you, and they shall bear with you. Okay, so what he said was every major matter to you and every minor matter they shall judge. And God says, and Moshe says, what should you do? And they judged the people at all times, the difficult things they would bring to Moses and the minor things they would judge themselves. What's the difference between verse 26, where Moshe says the difficult things they will bring and the little ones that they would judge, and verse 22? I'll tell you, some of you don't have the Chumash, so I'll tell you what one says, all the major things they would judge, and the other one says the difficult things they would judge. What's the difference between major and difficult? Jeopardy music.
I mean, major is relative. It's like, how are we supposed to decide which mitzvah is greater or less? Difficult is complex and variables and.
Okay, so how does it work in small claims court in the United States?
I think there's a certain limit of money that you can.
It has to do with money. If it's more than X amount, I don't know if it's 5,000, 10,000, I don't remember what it was anymore. If it's more than $5,000, then you can't do it in small claims court. But if it's less than that, so Yisro is saying major and minor, big deal, little deal. Moshe is saying, no, it has to do with how difficult the question is. Question could be about $100, but that could be a very difficult question. And therefore, it's not about major or minor, it's about difficult and minor. Does everyone hear the difference? Because when it's dealing with a important issue, it may not be a lot of money, but that's not the issue. You don't just say, it's a little amount of money, who cares? We do care. And what's the Jewish law when it's that way? So that's a distinction that's important. All right, and then we get to the main event, if you will, of the parsha, which is it's 3 months after the Jewish people left Egypt, and they go to the desert of Sinai, and the Jewish people rested by the mountain, and Moshe went up to God, and this is what he should tell the Jewish people. Actually, it says this: Kosomar leves Yaakov, speak softly to the house of Jacob, which is referring to the women. That's why, by the way, the women's schools are called Beis Yaakov, because of this verse. And speak harshly strong to the men, to the children, the men of Israel. And you see what happened here. Listen to my mitzvos. You be a chosen people, most beloved treasure of all the people, and be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Do you want the commandments? Now, God really went to all of the nations of the world and asked them, do you want the Torah? So the nations asked a very simple question: what's in it? So the children of Esav, the descendants of Esav, were told, no murder. And they said, no. Hey, look, God, there's some situations where, we're angry, something's going on. We can't accept that as a Torah. The descendants of Yishmael asked, do you want the Torah? And they said, what's in it? They said, oh, you're not allowed to steal. Stealing, no, that's part of our business. Can't do that. And what did the Jewish people say? The Jewish people said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will hear and we will do. I'm sorry, we will do and we will hear. Meaning to say, we accept whatever Hashem is giving us, which is an amazing thing. How could you do before you hear? Well, one explanation is that we're going to do it and then we'll get the understanding later on. We don't have to know why, when, or where. God said, we're going to do it. And everyone should get ready for 3 days and prepare themselves, and they should go to the mountain, put a fence around it, that they should know that they shouldn't go onto the mountain. And he told the Jewish people what they should do, and this is the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, which was a very amazing and frightening experience for them. There was a cloud getting stronger, and people were afraid. And this, by the way, is one of the reasons how Judaism is different than every other language and any other religion in the world, because we have a public revelation. All the nations of the world don't have that. This one person said he's this other person said he was that, either Muhammad or Jesus, whatever. Judaism has a public revelation where God revealed himself to the entirety of the Jewish people. And we, by the way, believe that our souls were there as well. And by the way, there's an interesting statement that some of the commentaries say that even the converts that come later on, when the nations of the world were asked, do you want the Torah? Some people in the back said, hey, that sounds interesting. We don't want the Torah. No. So the souls of those people who are interested, those are the souls that later on become converts. So that's a very beautiful idea. And Moshe came up onto the mountain and said what is known as the 10 Commandments. But really, it's not 10 Commandments. I hate to break it to you. Because what would be the word in Hebrew for commandments? Say it. Right. It's not the Aseres HaMitzvos. It's Aseres HaDibros, Daber. It's the 10 utterances. So it's 10 topics that have several mitzvahs in it. So there's approximately 13, 14 mitzvahs in the 10 Commandments. So it's called the 10 Commandments because that's what everyone says it's called. So we'll just refer to it as the 10 Commandments, but it's really not 10 Commandments, really more than that, but it's called the 10 utterances. And we'll go through them quickly. And really, each commandment deserves its own class, but we'll just go through them quickly. The first one is, I am God, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. And the second one is, don't have other idols or images. Don't serve them, don't worship them. Don't say God's name in vain. Remember to keep the Shabbos holy. 6 days you should work, on the seventh day you should rest. You and all of your family and all of your workers and animals, because God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. The fifth one is honoring your father and your mother, so you will live long. The sixth one is not to murder. The seventh one is not to commit sexual adultery, sexual sins. Don't kidnap. Don't say false testimony about somebody else, and don't be jealous of somebody else of what they have. So these are the 10 utterances. Rav Haigain, one of the great Jewish thinkers, says how all 613 are based upon these 10, but you can even simplify it more. The first commandment, I am God your God who took you out of Egypt, represents all of the positive commandments, because there's a total of 613 commandments, 365 negative and 248 positive. And the 248 positive are connected to I am the God who took you out of Egypt. So it's how to develop a closer relationship with God through the positive commandments. The negative commandments, the 365, those represents things that potentially could pull us away. And that is represented by the second of the 10 commandments, which is don't have any other idols. Because those worshiping other things and doing the negative commandments are the things that put distance between us and God. Is this clear so far? Are we good? Okay. Now, what happened was God spoke directly to the Jewish people. And the first two commandments were overwhelming for the Jewish people to participate with. So much so that they went flying and their souls left them, and God had to do the resurrection of the dead and put the souls back in. And after the two, they said, God, speak through Moshe, because it's too much. It's too powerful. And that's what happened. And it's interesting to note that the word Torah so the first two God spoke directly, and the rest Moshe taught them. Let's do the numerical value of Torah. Kaf is 400. Vav is 6. Resh is 200. And Hey is 5. Total? What?
700. 611.
611. So we say the verse says Torah Tziva Lanu Moshe. The Torah was commanded to us by Moshe. Wouldn't it be great if it was 613? It almost made it. Well, it's only 611 because the first two God gave directly himself. Moshe taught the rest of the 611 of the 613, because the first two about I am God, you took you out of Egypt, and don't have any other gods. That God did directly. So Torah, so it's not coincidental that it's only 611. It works perfectly. So now, why did God pick Moshe and Mount Sinai to give the Torah on? Because they were humble. The representatives of all the mountains said, God will surely pick me. I'm the tallest, the nicest, the most flowers, the most trees. And Mount Sinai said, I'm not going to be picked. I'm nothing special. God said, no, you're humble. That's why I'm going to give the Torah. Moshe was also humble. The humility is a powerful, I think, there's a great story with Baron Edmund D. Rothschild, who was a mover and a shaker in Europe. He had banks and countries and noblemen and kings would deal with him all the time. And in France, in Paris, he was very well respected, but despite this, there's always people that are jealous and make trouble. So two government officials showed up to him and said, "We heard that you have in your mansion a room that is locked that no one has access to, and we're afraid that you have books there that might reveal that you're not being honest with your money and the taxes." And he said to them, "Look, I'd really rather not open it up. I'll give you 10,000 francs if you just let me be." And he raised it to 100,000. This time they did not refuse that right, but they have to report the matter to superiors. They came back, "No, we have to check it out." So he was humbled, and he went, and the soldiers appeared ready to see in what was going to be in there, on the huge treasury. And instead they opened the room. There was no furniture. There was only a stone monument in the center, and on it was engraved, "Hoi Nimpman, here lies Shimon Wolf ben Kleinemius." It was a tombstone, his own tombstone. And they looked at him and said, "What's this?" And he said, "I deal with kings and noblemen and countries and government officials, and I'm concerned it shouldn't get to my head. So I prepared a tombstone here. So I go in every day into this room to realize that one day I'm going to be lying in the ground and this tombstone is going to be lying on my head. And all of my power and all of my prestige and all of my money." It's really a powerful idea of what true humility is. Now, the 10 Commandments, they're 5 and 5. If the two tablets, the first 5 deal with the relationship between man and God, and the second 5 deal with the relationship between man and man. And that's an important idea, because a person can't just choose, say, "Oh, I'm me and God, I listen to everything." People, I don't have patience for them. People, well, the other one says, "God's commandments are not written. I really want to have good relationship with people." And God says, no, you need both. You need to have a relationship with people that follows Torah, and a relationship with God as well. Interestingly enough, by the way, the 10 Commandments, as we call them, have 620 letters, which is a reminder of the 613 Torah commandments plus the 7 rabbinic commandments. So that's the 620 letters of the 10 Commandments. Interesting, by the way, one of the things it talks about is honoring your parents. It doesn't say the mitzvah is not to love them. Why would that be?
Maybe honor is more significant than loving.
In a certain way, you're right. In a certain way, you're right. And another aspect of it is some parents aren't so lovable. Unfortunately, they're not so lovable. But honor, respect them, that's something that we can require of everybody. Now, there are rare exceptions, if like serious abuse and stuff, that you don't have to honor them either. But that already needs a question from a rabbi. Some kids today think if they don't get the allowance that they expect, that's a root called abuse. You know what I'm saying? We're not going that far. But there are times when you don't have to. But generally, even if the parents aren't so lovable, we honor them anyway. The Dubna Maggid has a beautiful parable. It's interesting that one of the things we learn is that what if a parent tells you to break a commandment? So now you have a problem. The Torah tells you to listen to your parent. On the other hand, you have to listen to the Torah. So what do you do? So the Dubna Maggid has a wonderful parable. And he says the following. He says there were 3 close friends that were inventors. The first invented a telescope that made you able to see for miles around. The second invented a swift vehicle. And third invented a powerful medicine that could cure every ill. One day, the inventor of the telescope noticed a great commotion far away at the king's palace, and he saw that the doctors were converging on the palace. Somebody must have been sick in the royal family. So the three friends jumped into the speedy car, and in seconds were at the door of the palace. They heard the princess was dying, and no medicine was known to save him. And the powerful medicine rushed in and gave it to him, and she was saved. And she had a full recovery. So the grateful king told the three, I will financially reward all of you, but one of you I offer my daughter's hand in marriage. Which one of you deserves the great reward? So the inventor of the telescope said, without my telescope, wouldn't have known what happened. And the inventor of the car said, yeah, great, but the telescope was great, but without my car, we wouldn't have gotten here on time. And the third guy said, my medicine was the one that saved the day. So who's right?
We are right.
All three are right. Very Jewish answer. Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. So who should be the one that the king allows to marry?
Or the medicine.
Why?
Because she's the smartest.
Why he's the smartest? The other guy was smart too. So the David Maga's parable says the king said, all three of you will be rewarded, but the one who had the medicine is the one who are allowed to marry the princess, because the telescope and the vehicle are not something that we're going to need, but we may need the medicine again. So that's why he's the one. So the David Maggid says we're in a similar situation. God and a person's parents are partners in creating every person, but a man's life is dependent solely on God from then on. Therefore, a person who has no right to obey his parents' wishes that contradict the Torah. It's very, very sweet idea, sweet story. So the idea of the Torah is so essential in helping us know how to navigate life and what is right and what is wrong. Reb, an interesting story on Rosh Hashanah when the Brisker Rav became rabbi of the town, and they said a Jewish soldier had fallen asleep while on sentry duty and was sentenced to be shot that day. The prisoner requested the opportunity to speak to the rabbi before he died, and the anti-Semitic officer said that if he doesn't come, they would shoot the people of the town. Tough decision. Rabbi Yitzchak Zev, the Brisker Rav, said, no, I'm not going. And the townspeople were upset. They're threatening to kill us. And they sent more messages, and they were being mean and said, no, I'm not going. I'm not going. And finally, in the end, what happened was they got a reprieve, and they realized that he wasn't doing anything terrible. He didn't mean to do anything bad. And the people were all upset at the Brisker Rav. But it was a miracle, and the guy was saved. And he said, it's very simple. I follow the Torah. Maimonides says that if a fellow Jew does not deserve capital punishment, we are not allowed to hand him over to be killed, even if we'll put others in danger. Had I gone to the prisoner when they asked me to, I would have spoken to him and they would have killed him. So I didn't want to go, so they shouldn't honor his last request. And this way he'll stay alive longer. And in the end, he was absolved. They found people to advocate on his behalf, and he made it. Had I gone on time, even though they were putting pressure on us, and all of you wanted me to go, I would have been sentencing him to death. So again, the Torah has, and a scholar is able to know what to do and how to answer by looking up what Jewish law says. So again, the Ten Commandments are a very powerful things to learn about and help us in life. And we'll just end with the one more law that's in the Torah, as well as a sweet story. One of the things is that they couldn't use sword to break the stones to make the altar. And then it talks about not going upstairs to the altar, but rather have a ramp. Because when you walk upstairs, the Kohanim, even though they're wearing pants beneath the special clothing that they wore, it's a little bit not, it's like, quote, embarrassing the stones. And Rashi says, beautiful, we're so careful not to embarrass the stones, so we don't have, because your legs are spreading when you're going up steps, so you have a ramp, so your steps are smaller. And Rashi adds a beautiful idea. Rashi says, you have to be careful about the stones, how much more so a friend of yours that's created in the image of God, how much more so you have to be careful not to embarrass. So that's the last law in Parsha Yisro. Now I want to conclude with an interesting story. In the bicentennial in 1976, the United States sponsored fireworks in Israel. And it was an unbelievable display. And there was a little Jewish boy there that was blown away by this. He had never seen fireworks before. And his response was thinking about what in history would represent this kind of unbelievable imagination and beauty and color. And he started screaming, Na'aseh v'nishma, I will do and I will hear, I will do and I will hear. Like he thought of the Sinai experience. And that, to me, was a very powerful thing. Like, my kids wouldn't have said that. My kids would have said, yeah, Disney was pretty good too, you know. But this little Israeli boy had never seen fireworks before. That's what he was associated it with. He associated with the accepting of the Torah, which the Jewish people did gladly and graciously when God offered it to them. All right. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Going once. Going twice. Going, gone. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank
We
you,
have-
Rabbi.
You're welcome. We had a great class last night with Rabbi Marcus. I would suggest people in Israel go hear him. And you want to get a recording of the class. You're not going to get full understanding because some of it was visual, but it's worth listening to the recording. Call the office and for a copy of it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi Czapnik.
You're welcome, Bracha. Take care, Igor. Take care.
Thank
Stefan,
you, Rabbi. See you soon.
Thank you.
David, Elisheva, Malka. Take care, Diane. All the best, everybody.